Hey YouTube, this is Robert Ness 816, and I just wanted to make a quick video about why I will rarely, if ever, post any videos on me fixing Super Nintendos. So these are actually two boards that I saved from a lot of Super Nintendos that I tried to fix. Um, and this is one of the shells that I saved, so the rest I pretty much threw out. I saved this shell just as an example. And here's a piece of another shell that I saved as an example. Um, so yeah, the Super Nintendo versus the Sega Genesis as far as repairs go. So what I have here are two versions of a Super Nintendo board. So this is the launch model Super Nintendo. So when you come across a Super Nintendo, this is what you're most likely going to come across. So this one would have had a heat sink right over here for the voltage regulator, and also would have had a separate Mitsumi sound module sitting up here. So what goes with these Super Nintendos, or what fails most of the time, is actually the SRAM chips. So these are custom Nintendo parts, and are also something called surface mount design chips. So these chips are actually mounted to the surface of the board, and then they are soldered on. So there really is no feasible means for me to remove these chips without spending a large sum of money to remove them. The other issue is that these chips are all custom made for Nintendo. That's why everything has Nintendo on them. Or these chips say Nintendo on them because they're all pretty much custom chips. Um, if the CPU goes bad, you're screwed. If any of these PPUs go bad, you're screwed. If the SRAM goes bad, you're screwed. If the PPU memory goes bad, you're screwed. Security chip goes bad, the video encoder, you're pretty much you're up shit's creek without a paddle, basically. Actually, I think this is the video encoder. I really don't, whatever. But anyways, yeah, there's very little that you can do. You can swap around the cartridge slots, and hopefully that'll maybe fix your problem, but that won't do shit. Um, you can change the voltage regulator, but these rarely ever go on these consoles. You can recap them, but Nintendo actually does have a pretty good track record of having good capacitors on these consoles. There really isn't anything that you can do with these. You can, change the fuses on these too. If a fuse goes bad, that, will rarely do anything, but that's pretty much it. They're junk. If they break, you're junk. So if your Super Nintendo has a black screen, you can try to clean up the cartridge connector on it. You can try to remove that cartridge connector and clean up the underlying socket here. You can try to reflow the solder on the socket here, which is what I tried to do, and that won't do anything. You can try to maybe reflow the solder on the what do you call it there, the video output, but that will rarely do anything. If you're not getting video out of the AV jack or the RF module, then pretty much that's telling you that the console is dead. So a black screen means that the CPU is not doing anything. If you get any type of like if you get like a gray screen or a blue screen, that means that the CPU is trying to do something, but it's being impeded somewhere along the ways. So either the memory is going bad, or the CPU is either on its last legs, or that's it. If any of the PPUs are going bad, usually you will see either messed up graphics on the screen, or you'll see lines on the screen. So sometimes with lines on the screen, you can try to reflow the solder on these PPUs, but the issue is that these pins are so close together that you really have no feasible means of reflowing the solder on these chips unless you get some type of I guess surface mount soldering device, like I forget what the hell they call it though. It's like a table or whatever, like a hot plate or whatever. You put the board on it, heats it up, and basically reflows the solder on these boards. But yeah, there's really not much you can do. So if you're ever getting a Super Nintendo in for repair, or you're looking to buy one, test it out with like 3 or 4 games that actually go through all the different modes that the CPU has. So test it out with an FX chip, test a game out that has an SA1 chip, a DSP chip, test it out with Super Mario World, You know, test it out with games that you know have different add-on chips that will go through all the different modes that the CPU has. You know, like F-Zero, whatever, or Mario Kart, something like that. And if the console freezes or hangs up during any of those games, even after you've cleaned the cartridge slot or the cartridge, then pretty much that means that you take this board and you throw it out. So that's basically it with the Super Nintendo. Same thing with these little boards. So with this one, I actually tried to save it. This one might not be 100% dead, but I'm assuming it probably is. So what happened here was some kid some kid spilled something in here. I'm assuming it was a kid. But something was spilled in this board where it corroded the board itself and destroyed it. So someone got to this before me and they tried to resolder the memory chip and to kind of fuck that up. And then they tried to actually solder the corrosion on this socket here. So what I did was I actually removed the original socket and I attempted to repair the traces on them. Tested all the traces out with a continuity meter after I managed to get solder to stick to them and reflow them. Also, all the traces were good going back to the memory and to this PPU right here. I also, like I said, I took a socket here and actually took it off of another dead Super Nintendo, put it onto this one. So I had to reflow all that solder, you know, put all new solder on here after I took this off, or that was at a challenge. And even after putting a new socket on it, I was greeted with nothing. So actually, I shouldn't say nothing. It went from a black screen to a gray screen. So that tells me that the CPU was trying to do something, but, you know, still whatever. This was probably about a waste of probably about 2 hours. So this one too is dead. Also, this happens a lot too with Super Nintendos. These stupid little power outlets break, but yeah. So you know, basically you take this Super Nintendo and you throw it in a trash. So the Genesis console. So the Genesis console is kind of cool. The Model 1 is anyway, in that it uses a lot of through-hole components. So what through-hole components are components that actually go through the board. So you can actually unsolder and remove these components and replace them with new components. So this was a VA2 console that was broken. So this one, the controller chip was actually dead. Actually, it worked, but it was stuck in the up position. So no matter what direction I went with the controller, it would always get stuck in the up position. Controller port 2 was perfectly fine. Controller port 1 was messed up. So I tried reflowing the solder on it. I tried replacing these resistor packs. That did nothing. Tested all the traces going back to the resistor packs and into this controller chip here. Nothing. So at that point, I pretty much gave up on it. So this board has actually saved 3 or 4 consoles. And it might possibly save another one. So I took the YM2612 off of this board and the CXA1145 off of this board, and I'm going to use it to save that other VA2 that I have upstairs. So things that I could still use this board for, the CPU I know is good, the CPU RAM is still good, the Z80 is still good, the Z80 memory is still good, the video memory is still good, the clock crystal is still good, so there's still a lot of good components here. And as you can see, I did strip all the capacitors off of this board too. But yeah, I mean, this saved a lot of consoles. There was one that had a bad AV socket. I replaced that. Another one I had a bad RF module. I replaced that. One needed a power switch. Another one needed a reset button. What console doesn't need a reset button? Another one had a broken volume slider. So there were, you know, a lot of boards that I saved with this one particular Genesis console. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So this board I will actually save since it actually has good components on it, and as you can see, I have another Genesis console here that I'm going to save. And as you can see, I have a lot of Hess trucks, but I took the VDP off of one of these boards. I actually cut it off with a Dremel tool just so I could try to dissect it and see what it looks like inside. So this was the fruits of my labor. So this is actually the raw die without the plastic enclosure on it, and it didn't end well. I kind of destroyed the die, so it's I don't know. I was actually going to try and take like cool macro pictures of that, but yeah. So besides the Super Nintendo boards basically being throwaways, we have the Super Nintendo plastic itself, which sucks. So most of the Super Nintendos that I got in that lot were pretty much junk. Besides being dirty, a lot of them were chipped and cracked and everything, and a lot of them fell apart when I tried to take them apart. So usually when you unscrew a Super Nintendo, if the plastic is not good, it will actually break. So here you have screw posts breaking off, you have it chipping more, you have an entire chunk of plastic, missing, and it sucks. These consoles, they suck. And the one thing that I did do with these consoles was actually take all of the phone number stickers off of the backs of them so I can put them onto my Game Boys. And the reason being is that you don't ever see Game Boys with the phone number stickers still on the battery cover, so I used the heat gun, got it off of this, and that was it. But yeah, these consoles, I mean, there's so much not to like about them, and there's also so much to like about them. I mean, these things, they go for like $100, and people still try to charge $100 for them in this condition. And this is, I mean, you can see how weak it is. It cracks even when I do that. I mean, you can hear it. So let's see, what if I got a mallet like this and I showed you guys how weak this plastic is? I mean, that's what happens with Super Nintendos. They suck. Look at that. So this is 100% useless because, I mean, granted I used a little bit of force, but eventually this will break on someone when they attempt to use it. So, I mean, I wasn't even using that much effort when I hit this thing. So it's just what happens with this shit plastic that they're made out of. So they used bromine in this plastic, and that pretty much weakened it up way too much. You can see how it's actually still the original color inside, but it's weak. And that's the issue here, is that it's weak, brittle, and I mean, you can hear it just cracking and crumbling when I do that. So more junk. So just an example that I saved for you guys, and that goes in the garbage. So pretty much it. That's, my take on why you will hardly see repair videos on Super Nintendo consoles, because they are, I don't know, they were ahead of their time, but at the same time they also used a cheaper manufacturing process that really limits their ability to be repaired, in the future and even back then. So, alright, that's it, guys. Thanks for watching.